Hey, welcome back to the Healthy Living Scottsdale podcast. I'm your host, Coach Zach. I'm here with CJ Hunt, aka Silly C.
Yo.
And Sweet as Candy, Coach Brandy. How we doing today, guys?
Doing great.
Wonderful.
Doing great. I'm feeling great. It's a beautiful Tuesday.
It is.
Yes, it is. All right. We got a good topic for you today. We're talking about intuitive eating, or as Brandy would call it, anti-dieting.
That's right.
So let's dive right into that. But first, let's talk about our client of the week. So I want to give a little shout out to somebody I think maybe we've given a shout out to before, but I can't remember when it was. So client of the week member highlight is Michael Bergman. I guess Dr. Michael Bergman.
Dr. B.
Dr. B, as we call him. And the reason I wanted to give him a shout out is he's probably, he's been here for a really long time. I mean, I think maybe 6 years, but also just super consistent, and he'll fall off a little bit with his diet or his workout routine maybe for a week or so, and then he's like right back on it and on track, and he works really hard. And so I think we mentioned it before on the podcast, but like one of the key indicators for if somebody's going to be successful is that they just show up, right? And he just shows up consistently, which is so powerful. And, for him, he works in healthcare. He's, somebody that practices what he preaches, which I think a lot of physicians don't necessarily do. And I think it's really cool when, we have a number of physicians here that are members, and I think it's really cool and powerful when somebody, prioritizes their health and they're attacking it from, a holistic approach. So good job, Dr. B.
He's here early every time, getting his dynamic warm up on, maybe running before his workout, and he's always here with a smile, ready to work.
Yeah.
Early. Yep.
So
He's scheduled, he's there.
Exactly. He never doesn't show up. So I don't think it's ever happened. All right, let's get into today's topic. So we're talking about intuitive eating, aka anti-dieting. And this is, it's an interesting topic because I think in an ideal world, this is exactly the way everybody should eat. It's probably the way everybody did eat, hundreds of years ago and prior to that, where it's like, I'm hungry, my body needs fuel, I'm going to have some food, right? And so there's pros and cons to that depending on the situation. Like Zach was mentioning last week, he said there's so many things that the answer to is it depends,
Right.
Which I would say is very true of intuitive eating. However, intuitive eating should be our end goal with our our clients that are, working on improving their nutrition and we're coaching them and guiding them through that process. So, Brandy, you're the nutrition expert. So I want to go to you on this, because I feel like not only do I feel like you probably have some really wise, thoughts on this, but also I'm assuming that this is kind of the way that you just naturally eat as well.
I try to be an intuitive eater, really without even knowing that that's what I was doing. But like you said, the intuitive eating is an anti-diet. It's like not following any sort of food restrictions, not eliminating certain foods, not following a diet. It's listening to your body's natural hunger signals, eating when you feel hungry, stopping when you feel full. Is basically the whole principle around intuitive eating. I think about a baby or a toddler who naturally, cries or, is fussy when it's feeling hungry, and then the baby will eat and then stop when it feels full. And so that's kind of the premise around intuitive eating. And yes, that's how we all should be eating. Unfortunately, there are some challenges around that. I think we've all, as we grow up, we may have, certain principles that were followed in our household, such as, eat every piece of food that's on your plate. And so you develop over time sort of these, I would say, habits that may take away that intuition, may affect your hunger signals. So you may not have those natural hunger signals that you did at one point in your life. And so there can be some challenges around it.
Yeah. And so that's the thing, right? It's the way everybody should eat. But as you mentioned, there are bad habits or bad eating practices that get people into a position where they can't eat intuitively, either because the cravings that they're having, or the dips in blood sugar, or maybe the ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone, is out of whack. They're insulin resistant. There's a bunch of different like chemical things that can happen in the body that can either signal to somebody that they're hungry all the time,
right,
or that they're not hungry and then they don't eat. Or if they have thyroid issues and their metabolism just isn't working, maybe they're not hungry. And so they'll go all day without eating. And then it's like, then when they do eat and they settle down, then they're overeating.
Right.
And so there's this complexity with intuitive eating that I struggle with, because everybody kind of wants this system, right? We've talked about the magic wand before, and it's like people really don't care, but they do care. Like they want the system to believe in, of like, if I follow these steps 1 through 10, then I know I'm going to see results.
Right.
And they want that clear-cut path. Intuitive eating it's opposite of that. It's like, there is no path. Let's just start making really small, like little changes to you paying attention to how you feel and what you need. And then all of a sudden, like we have healthy eating habits again.
Right.
And that is the way that it should be, but it doesn't work for everyone. Right.
Right.
Yeah, I think that I kind of look at it. I've got a 3-year-old at home, and he's on a different eating schedule than we are. He pretty much eats when he's hungry. He tells us like, "Hey, I'm hungry," and then we go to the fridge, and he kind of looks in there and sees what he wants to eat. He's like, "I think I want some yogurt right now," and he's not eating anything bad. He may want some sweets every once in a while, but it's not something that he does every single time. Nor do we let him. He honestly sticks with lots of fruits and vegetables, and it's kind of when he needs to. And he'll eat half a banana. He's like, "No, I'm full." And then he'll come back in maybe like an hour or so and want to eat the rest of the banana. So it kind of look at it kind of in that way. And that's him starting out. He doesn't have those habits, even though he's on a different eating schedule, still eating the same types of food that we are, but just at a different time.
Yeah. Yeah. Babies, kids, like they're the perfect example of this, of what intuitive eating should look like. And I think that, one of the problems that also exists is everybody's so stinking busy, right? And we hear it from our clients all the time, like, "Oh, it's just too busy to eat." Clients tell me they're too busy to drink water. Right? Like one of the very first steps in a nutrition coaching program is like hydration. Right. That's probably number one, is like, okay, here's what we're going to focus on until you master this habit. Is we're not going to worry about what you're eating. We're just going to worry about the fact that like you need to drink 100 ounces of water. Okay, here's how, let's start working on that. And then when you mastered that, then we can start talking about like the actual food that you're eating.
Right.
But we hear all the time, people are like, I'm too busy to stop and drink water. I'm too busy to stop and eat. And so even if they're suppressing the intuition, it's not necessarily that it's not there, but they're just distracted. And so they're not paying attention to the fact that their body is hungry, their body is thirsty, they do need this fuel. I guess that would be the only time, like maybe a little kid would, if they're busy playing, then they'll get distracted, right? And then they throw a tantrum later because they're like so hungry they don't realize it.
Right.
But humans, like adult humans, are pretty much living in that state the majority of the time. At least a lot of our clients, when they come in, are. And so intuitive eating, I would say, is still probably the powerful practice. But you have to create structure around being able to recognize those cues and pay attention to them. So it's like you almost have to set an alarm, which is still a system. It's still a structure in place. We're not necessarily telling the client like, okay, you have to eat this. You know, even though we do most of the time, but the goal would be, we don't have to tell them what to eat. We just have to tell them, like, stop and listen to your body for a moment.
Right. And not only is it when to eat, but also listening to your body around when it's time to stop eating too. Because I think a lot of times we are in a hurry, or someone might be in a hurry, or, you know, they're not eating all day. And then at the end of the day, they're just starving. And so they eat a ton of food, or they'll go through fast food because they don't have a lot of time to have lunch. And so they'll get a bunch of food, and eat it quickly, where your brain actually needs about 15 minutes to catch up to your signal from your stomach that your stomach is full. So you won't realize until about 15 minutes after you are eating that you're full. So in that during that time, you could be overeating because you're not listening to your body's natural hunger signals because you're eating too fast. So another tip would be to slow down, be mindful, be conscious about what you're eating, around those signals that your body's telling you when you are full. And then when you are starting to feel full, to stop at that point and not, don't feel like you have to eat everything that's on, that's put in front of you.
And remove distractions while you're eating, right? So, if you're eating in front of the TV, you're not really focusing on what you're eating. And you're distracted. Your mind is somewhere else. And so it's kind of like, you could basically blend up something and just drink it with all the necessary nutrients. And if you're distracted, you're not really going to know the difference between doing that and then having like something that's a piece of pizza, or having a whole entire pizza. It's going to basically taste the same to you because you're distracted and you're not paying attention. So one of the things that always gets me is like, you might see some unhealthy food intake in one of our clients' logs, like food logs. And one of the key questions to ask them is like, what were you doing when you ate that? And if they tell me I was sitting at the table with my family and we were having a conversation and, we were having pizza, I'm like, okay, not a big deal, because, that's whatever. I mean, we're humans. You got to live, you got to enjoy life. Yeah. But if they're like, well, I was sitting down watching a movie, eating the pizza, I'm like, did you really think about the pizza while you were eating it? Did you enjoy it, or were you distracted?
Right. And
if we pay attention to the food that we're eating, and we're taking in all of the tastes and, the flavor of it, and we're thinking about how it's, cooked and nourishing our bodies, or, what it's doing for our bodies, and we're just enjoying that experience, we're not going to eat as much because we're going to notice that we're full much quicker. We're going to be more satisfied. But if I'm distracted, I'm just going to keep shoveling it in without consciously like enjoying it. And what good did that do? Right. So I had a client, this was probably like 2 years ago. They got COVID. They couldn't taste or smell anything. And they just ordered like takeout crap and ate it at home during COVID, or while having COVID, being unable to taste and eat anything. And I was like, They're like, it was comfort food. And I'm like, you couldn't taste it.
Right.
You couldn't taste it. Like that would have been the opportune time for you to just shovel broccoli into your mouth. And it didn't even, it could have been bland. You could have lost like 15 pounds right there in that, 2-week period. Instead, you were ordering like crap food that you couldn't even taste.
Right. Probably because that was their habit.
That was,
right?
yes.
Their habit, what they're used to eating.
Right. Yeah. So, anyway, I know I've ranted on that, but it just like blew my mind because I was like, if you can't taste this food, just like you're also sick. So I would think like, okay, I want to give my body as much like nutrients as possible so that I can get better right away and not be putting sugar and, trans fats and whatever other garbage into my body.
I think that also comes down to knowing the difference between like physical hunger and emotional hunger. You're talking about the comfort foods.
Yes. Thank you for bringing that up.
That's emotional hunger. You want comfort food. Well, that's not what you're needing to do. That's not being intuitive. That's just having craving. Having the physical hunger is what you actually need. The nutrients that you're feeling, what your body is actually telling you that you need. You got to know the difference between that to make intuitive eating effective.
Exactly.
Yeah. And when we talked about, I think 2 episodes ago, when it was fueling your fitness, and we're talking about the, eating for the things that you are doing to provide your body with that nutrients, that's the same thing. It's like, you're right. I mean, it's emotional versus physical. It's like, what do I need versus, what am I trying to fulfill here? Mm-hmm. What gap am I trying to fulfill? And I think a lot of times where people get into trouble is that they're, it's not that they're sitting down and eating meals with people. I know, it came up yesterday in a conversation with somebody that they were at an event and people were upset that they weren't eating and with them and having pizza. And must be a sign pizza keeps coming up. So I don't know. Maybe you need to get some of that. I haven't eaten lunch
your comfort
yet.
Food?
That is, that's definitely my comfort food. That and bourbon. Is bourbon a food? I guess. Yeah, whatever. But it came up yesterday in conversation and she's like, no, I didn't have the pizza. But if you're, less, I think it happens less where it's a problem of people having meals with friends and family and enjoying that moment. If somebody wants to do that and it's, within reason, right? It's not like a nightly thing. Within reason, I don't think that's really where we get into trouble. I think where we get into trouble is when we're by ourselves or on the run, as you mentioned, we're in a hurry, we're hitting the drive-through, we're not really paying attention and closely to what it is we're eating and what we need, right? It's more of like, it's just like mindless. I'm just trying to get the food and eat it. In which case I would say you're probably better off just not eating. Right. I mean, that's not a good practice, but I wouldn't recommend that. But also if you can't intuitively recognize that, hey, my body needs this nutrients, I'm going to eat and provide it with what it needs, then probably just don't eat.
Yeah. And I think the intuition too is about recognizing what makes your body feel good. So after you eat, being conscious and aware about how did that make you feel? Yes. Did you feel good after you ate that meal or did you not feel good after you ate that meal? And then, learning to eat those things that make you feel good. But then again, I think one meal or one, a quote, bad snack a week is not going to make or break you. It's your, overall daily, weekly eating routine. That's going to have an impact. If you have, one thing a week or one snack a week that's, not necessarily healthy, that's okay. That's not going to break your plan. Yeah.
And going back to kind of like the intuitive eating goal. I think each one of us is perfectly capable of saying like, I'm going to eat when I'm hungry and I'm just going to pay attention to that. And I'm not going to worry about what my macros are. I'm not going to worry about what the calories are. Like, I'm just going to eat. right? We have good enough habits in place already for us to be able to understand the cues of our body and then provide it with quality nutrients. For somebody that's starting out, you're not going to have that, right? And so that would be the goal, because it's not good to live in like such a structured, regimented, restrictive way long term.
Right.
But we want to create slowly, one step at a time, the process, the routine, the habit of, okay, here's what we do. Here's what, breakfast looks like. Here's how much water we drink. Here's what lunch looks like, and our snacks and our dinners, and put those things in place. And you can start with like, the half of your plate should be vegetables, and a quarter of your plate should be protein, and a quarter of your plate should be like a starch or whatever. That's a really simple solution for somebody a visual for somebody to see and know, okay, this is what it needs to look like. And at first that has to be like, okay, here's what you're doing. Okay. So that somebody can actually start to implement it, but then you can start getting more lax with that. And people should continue that practice even without there being like a system in place.
Right.
But it has to become habitual for them.
Yeah. Natural process.
Yeah. Natural process. Where do you guys suggest somebody starts? Because that's going to be the key question. I can see it from listeners. They're going to be like, okay, great. Intuitive eating is great, but I'm starting from square one. Like, what do I do? What advice do you have for them?
I think one place to start would be just paying attention to how you feel and to your body's signals. So not even making necessarily changes right away, just paying attention to when your body feels hungry and when it feels full, and what are those natural cues that your body is sending to your brain.
Yeah, I like that. Like, my recommendation would be to just write down, from the time you wake up, just hours. Just put the hours, let's say you get up at 6 a.m. You just list 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m., 9 a.m., 10 a.m. And then just like for the day as a practice, just start like at 6 a.m. I woke up not hungry. Okay, cool. At 7 a.m. hungry, right? At 8 a.m., whatever, I was fatigued or something already. Like, just start logging it and keeping track of how you feel. That's a really good practice. And then we can do something with that. Mm-hmm. We can start to build off of there and find either like the things you did that were causing a negative reaction, or the things that you didn't do that were causing a negative reaction. And as soon as you feel like the bad thing, then we just look at the previous stuff and we're like, okay, what happened or didn't happen? What do we implement here to fix that?
Good suggestion.
I think another thing that you can do is, if you start with a smaller plate than what you normally have, you can go with that. There's no harm in going back, giving a little bit of time after you finish that plate to see if you are hungry or you still need to eat. So if you have a smaller plate, finish that whole plate, that's fine. But then give yourself 10 minutes, see if you're still hungry after those 10 minutes. And then if you are, then you can go back and get a little bit more and stick to, I like the analogy you had, half vegetables, protein, and then the other starch as well. Like, have a smaller plate. If you have a smaller plate, you're going to be okay.
Yeah. Slow yourself down. Give yourself a bigger window to feel
and digest. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And see if you're full or not. It's really good. All right. You guys got anything else?
I don't have anything else.
Okay. All right. I'm going to sign off here, and CJ is going to drop some words of knowledge on you, and then we'll be back with you guys with more great stuff next week.
Let your presence be a present to those around you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Healthy Living Scottsdale podcast. Do you have a question that you'd like for us to answer live on the podcast? If so, all you need to do is head over to the Apple Podcast app on your iPhone and do 3 simple things. First, leave us a rating and review telling me what you think of the podcast. In that review, ask anything you want related to health, fitness, or nutrition. And if you want a shout out, leave us your Instagram handle or name. That's all you have to do. Then listen to hear your questions answered live on the next Q&A episode.